It has been a pretty crazy couple of days. For those who aren't aware, April LSAT scores came out yesterday morning, and since then, I've gotten reports from many test takers who got their scores back and were surprised to have dropped 10, 20 points or more from their practice test averages, even though they felt like the test had gone fine. I heard from one test taker who was PTing in the 140s and got literally a 120 on her actual official April LSAT exam. I talked to another student who had prep test averages of 178 or 179 and dropped all the way down 10 points to a 169. So many test takers surprised and shocked by their results. Keep in mind, of course, there is a selection bias in those who post online. There's a selection bias in those who reach out to me after their exams. And of course, there are plenty of people who were happy with their scores who did fine. But this does seem a bit unusual. I have not seen disappointing results like this for so many test takers in at least a couple of years. In fact, there is a conspiracy theory going around that LSAC made the April LSAT harder to balance it out with those taking the August LSAT without logic games. The context here is that supposedly the LSAT is easier when logic games is on it, and it'll be harder for those taking the LSAT in August without logic games. And so the idea here is that LSAC is looking to balance out those taking the April test with those taking the August test. I don't place a lot of value on a conspiracy theory like this. Of course, the LSAT is standardized, and so LSAC is not likely to make radical changes to one test form versus another, even if they want to even things out for one application cycle. However, that being said, there has been a lot of LSAT score inflation over the past few years that is pretty unintentional on LSAC's part. This score inflation is for a couple of reasons. It's due to a couple of reasons. One of them is the previous LSAT Flex format innovated at the beginning of the pandemic when they reduced the LSAT from 4 sections to only 3 and moved it from being in person to being online. That led to a significant score boost and score inflation because LSAC underestimated just how much easier the LSAT would be when you didn't have to take it in person at a testing center, and they also underestimated how much time people would have to study for the LSAT during the pandemic and the impact that would have. Additionally, and this is not talked about quite as much, but there has been a significant increase in LSAC granting accommodations. They actually grant accommodations for things like extra time to the vast majority of those who ask for them. And so the combination of these factors has led to rising LSAT medians and significant percentile changes when it comes to the LSAT. For example, now all of the T14 law schools have LSAT score medians of 170 or above, and there have been significant shifts in percentile as well. So for example, it used to be that you could get a 173 on the LSAT and be in the 99th percentile. Now you've got to get a 175 in order to be in the 99th percentile. And so to counteract this score inflation, LSAC could be making the so-called curve, aka the raw score conversions, harder to account for this. Of course, we're not going to know for quite some time since LSAC is not releasing the raw score conversion for the April LSAT specifically, and anyone who took the April LSAT and is disappointed with their scores, of course, you're not going to see the test form of what you answered, anything like that. And so if it is the case that LSAC is looking to counteract the recent LSAT score inflation, it doesn't seem quite fair to me that they would make such a radical change over such a short period, impacting those taking the April LSAT or maybe taking the April LSAT and taking the upcoming June LSAT as well. They shouldn't make such a radical change in such a short period of time. They should instead, of course, make any of these changes far more gradually, which is, of course, possible since the LSAT's administered roughly 8 times per year. But bottom line, if this is what they're doing, it is what it is. We can't really do anything about it, and we don't even have a lot of visibility into that. If you are, however, in the situation where you took the April LSAT and now you're retaking the LSAT in either June or August or both, I would recommend that going forward, you focus on drilling hard questions to be ready for anything, since there may be an increase in the relative proportion of harder LSAT questions on the test. And at the very least, of course, it does seem that the raw score conversions may be getting harder for the foreseeable future. Now, if you are looking to change your approach for the LSAT going forward, you might want to consider creating a personalized study plan for yourself to ensure that you drill the areas that need the most work for you going forward. This is something that we do for our students at LSAT Unplugged, which you might want to consider since, of course, if you want to get a different result next time you take the LSAT, you've got to prep differently than you have up to this point. So if there is a resource you were considering, but you didn't pursue it, now's the time. And of course, the best way to prep, especially if you're on a short timeline for the June LSAT, is going to be private, personalized, one-on-one coaching, tailor-made to exactly what you need on your schedule. If you're interested in finding out more, you can check out the links below the video to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, if you are in the unfortunate position where you took the April LSAT and it didn't turn out how you were looking for it to turn out, how you expected it would turn out, and you're looking to see maybe as a last resort, could you ask LSAC to double check everything on your LSAT score report? You can do an LSAT score audit for $150 to double check your scores. Keep in mind that whether the result of that audit is higher or lower than your current score, that's going to be it. That new score will stand, and you can't audit your score a second time. Of course, you are highly unlikely to get a change in your score as a result of an audit, since this is now, of course, a computerized test. It's not as if you might have misbubbled on a paper LSAT like you would have in the past prior to the pandemic, but that is one option to consider moving forward. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.